Intermountain Railway Company continues to release its EMD rebuild GP10 Paducah locomotives. This month they released the Chicago Central and Pacific red and white paint scheme. Please look at my other videos. I've done a comprehensive review of the Intermountain GP10, and those videos can be found on my YouTube page. I just wanted to show this one real quick simply because I'm extremely excited that Chicago Central has been released as a road name, particularly in this GP10 locomotive. The small town I grew up in was part of, it had a main line of the Illinois Central and later the Illinois Central Gulf's Iowa Division run right through the middle of town. So it was very common when I was a kid growing up in the 1980s to see a lot of the GP10s going through town, mostly in the orange and white paint scheme. 1985 Illinois Central spun off the Iowa Division and it became the Chicago Central and Pacific. So the Chicago Central and Pacific operated track from Chicago through Waterloo, and then it reached as far west as Sioux City and Council Bluffs. So it was very common after the spin-off of the Chicago Central and Pacific that we saw a lot of patched out, the orange and white patch out Illinois Central, so they painted over the Illinois Central road name. A lot of them were just orange and white with very little identifying marks on them. The Chicago Central logo is really a takeoff of the Illinois Central, the original Illinois Central green diamond logo. So this one is a green diamond with the word Chicago Central in it. I've already contacted Intermountain basically to find out if they release the GP10s at some point in the future, and my guess is they will have a second run of these models sometime in the next 2 to 3 years because they already have the moldings and everything for them, that they would actually release the Chicago Central and Pacific in an orange and white patch out Illinois Central Gulf locomotive. The person I talked to at Intermountain said that they had already identified 4 road numbers for the orange and white patch out scheme, so hopefully at some point in the future we will be seeing a release of Chicago Central orange and white GP10s that are the patched out versions. So I am excited to see the Chicago Central and Pacific road name be released, again because very few manufacturers produce this particular road name. I have very fond memories of this railroad from my childhood days, watching them go through town. The town that I lived in, we actually had a small siding that went off to the local co-op grain elevator, and then there was also a passing siding right on the edge of town, so it was very common to see trains sitting there waiting for either the eastbound or the westbound to go through before they could proceed on either to Chicago or to Waterloo. So real brief history about Chicago Central road number 1775. This locomotive was built in the 1950s as an EMD GP9 road number 9165, originally purchased by the Illinois Central Railroad. This operated as a GP9 for several years until 1970, when it was sent to the Paducah, Kentucky shops to be rebuilt. When it was rebuilt into a GP10, the original Illinois Central road number for that GP10 was 8165, and it continued in operation as 8165. Eventually the Illinois Central Gulf, or they merged with Gulf Mobile in Ohio and it became the Illinois Central Gulf, and then eventually the Iowa Division of the Illinois Central Gulf was spun off and the Chicago Central was created. So Chicago Central took over the Illinois Central 8165 and it became the Chicago Central 8165 in a patched out version for several years. It wasn't until the late 1980s that Chicago Central began repainting a lot of their old orange and white hand-me-down GP10s that they went to this red and white paint scheme, and after it was painted from the orange and white to the red and white, it became road number 1775. When this particular unit was rebuilt in 1970, it was a Phase 2A locomotive, and some of the spotting features of the original 2A locomotive were the horizontal headlight mounted on the short hood, and they also had a roof mounted gyro light. And subsequently, and if you see a lot of the prototype photos, as time progressed, the Illinois Central Gulf actually removed the roof mounted light and basically just put a panel over it, and you can see that that's reflected on this particular locomotive. This locomotive also was prior to the mandation of the platform mounted ditch lights, so there's no ditch lights on this particular unit. A couple other the spotting features on this unit that are different than some of the other GP10s that Intermountain produced, because this was typical of the prototypes. This locomotive has a firecracker and Sinclair antenna, and the Horst air filter actually has been chopped off if you look at my other videos on the Illinois Central ones, they actually come down a little bit further, so they were actually chopped off, so they're almost flush with the high hood. I'm sorry, the long hood. Another modification were the long hood roof panels to gain access into the engine compartment. Going along with my Chicago Central GP10 locomotive, about 4 to 5 months ago, Tangent Scale Models also released a Chicago Central PS 4240 covered hopper. This is an old Illinois Central, the gray 1970 scheme, but you can see that this is a patched out Chicago Central 56863. So they only released one road number of this, and of course I was able to pick that up. So I do have a couple pieces of Chicago Central, the Chicago Central road name for my layout. I absolutely love Tangent Scale Models. They have some of the most realistic rolling stock out on the market today. I probably have at least over a dozen of their covered hoppers, either the 4740s or the 4750s, and probably my biggest complaint about their rolling stock is, and then this happens on a lot of them, the roof panel walkways just are not properly secured, and this has happened to multiple on multiple models that I have. I mean, it's not a huge deal. You have to just glue them back down, but it is somewhat of a pain. These things are so highly, there's so much tension on them that they don't get enough glue and they just pop off. So it's a little bit annoying that this happens, but unfortunately for the price of realism, sometimes they just don't get them secured as well as they should, and that happens. So here's my Chicago Central locomotive and covered hopper. It's the only two pieces of Chicago Central equipment that I have. Just going to real briefly take and fire this up. I just got the Chicago Central GP10 last week, so I haven't even had it turned on yet. So I'm just going to go power it up, do a quick sound check, make sure that it works okay, and let you guys watch that. So that's it for today. Please stay tuned. I have a lot of excitement going on. My layout is currently under construction. You should see some videos on that here shortly.